That news conference continues with Rhode Island State Treasurer Seth Magaziner. He's a Democrat running for Congress in the 2nd District. Treasurer, thanks for coming back. This is your second or third time, I think, in with us.
Great to be here.
All right, lots happened since you were here the last time. You know, we're taping on a Friday. Let's begin with the news. We just got word that Paul Pelosi, the Speaker's husband, sounds like he was viciously beaten in a break-in at his home. Do you know him?
I don't know him. Obviously, it's terrible news, and our hearts are with him and with the Speaker and their whole family. And as we are taping here today, we have no idea what the motivation was or why this happened. But, you know, I think this is a moment where we all have to recognize that public figures are also human beings, and we need to try to take the temperature down in this country and have less vitriol in our politics.
Okay, well, listen, I don't know that anybody would disagree with that. This will, however, play, I think, into conservative critics later tonight. Crime is out of control in San Francisco and other Democrat-led cities. I could see that coming. Do you see that coming?
Well, listen,
even the Speaker's husband is a victim.
I think if anyone tries to politicize an event like this, they're making a huge mistake. It's a political mistake, but also morally the wrong thing to do. Again, we don't know what the motivation for this was. We don't know what happened yet at the time that we're taping today. What we know is that this is a terrible event, and it's not a time for politics.
Let's pull him out then. Let's say this never happened. What do you say to the critics who say Democrat-run cities are out of control when it comes to crime? That's become an issue with you because crime is an issue in your campaign.
Well, listen, we're getting into silly season in the campaign, and the fear-mongering is to an extreme. Listen, my record on this is clear. I have always been supportive of law enforcement in Rhode Island. I've been a partner, particularly with the state police in my role as state treasurer. In the treasurer's office, we provided more than $100 million to law enforcement agencies across the state last year alone. I think if we want to get serious about cracking down on crime, we also have to have a real conversation about gun safety as well. In Rhode Island, we've passed some really good gun safety bills over the last few years. That's one of the reasons that we haven't seen the high rates of crime that other parts of the country are experiencing. And there's a real difference between me and my opponent, Allan Fung, on this as well. You know, on bills like banning guns on school grounds, the red flag law to allow law enforcement to temporarily confiscate firearms from people who are a danger to themselves or others. I was strongly in support of those bills to make our community safer. My opponent was against it. And at the national level, there's a real difference too. I see Democrats in Washington are serious about cracking down on gun violence. Too many Republicans, not all, but too many, seem to take their marching orders from the gun companies instead of from law enforcement on this issue.
So you're strong on crime. You want to go, you're strong on crime. There's a picture of you floating around, though. You were at a BLM rally. I remember this one up in Providence. And it's right behind you. It says, defund the police. I don't know if we have that picture to put up. There it is. Your opponent's making hay out of this. You want to explain that to us?
Yeah, so again, this is silly season, right, in the campaign. I have certainly never supported defunding the police. As a matter of fact, as state treasurer, it is my job to fund the police, and that's what we do. So if the best that they can find, my opponents, is that one time I walked by somebody who was holding a sign that I disagreed with, I'm sure we have all walked by people holding signs we disagree with at one point or another. And don't forget also who's funding these ads, right? So there's millions of dollars in negative ads being spent against me that are being funded by the oil companies, the prescription drug companies, and it's because they know that I'm going to be tough on the oil companies and the drug companies that are overcharging people for the gas, the heating oil, prescription drugs, and my opponent, Allan, has taken their money from the oil companies and the drug companies. He is not taking a hard line against those companies that are overcharging Rhode Islanders. So don't forget who's spending all that money to put out those false ads. There's a real difference between us on that issue.
What was your understanding of that rally in March? What were you there for? That was a BLM. It was an anti-police rally.
No.
There was a riot. What was your understanding of going there?
So, you know, I think like thousands and thousands of Rhode Islanders, I have always spoken out against racism in our society, but I have never and never would condone any sort of anti-police rhetoric because that's not my record. Again, as state treasurer, I have been a partner with law enforcement for the last 8 years. And so for somebody to say just because one time I walked by somebody holding a sign that reflects my views, it doesn't. Any more than if you walk by somebody holding a sign that you might disagree with. My record is clear.
You've also put out that picture of Allan Fung in a Trump hat. So we've got dueling photographs now. And he says, look, I went to the inaugural, and by the way, with the exception of a handful of people in Congress, every other Democrat was there too. And it was cold, I put the hat on. Have you been fair to him with that particular picture?
Well, he has also said that he supported Donald Trump, not just the first time, but the second time too. even after 4 years of chaos and division, kids being put in cages, separated from their families, really harsh policies. Donald Trump trying to repeal the Affordable Care Act, which would have meant that 70,000 Rhode Islanders would lose their health insurance. And of course, the events on January 6th, where he literally tried to cancel the results of the election. Even after all of that, Allan Fung still said that he stood by Donald Trump, wasn't going to run away from him, voted for him twice. So there's a clear difference there. You know, when it comes to Allan's support consistently for a president that I think was divisive and bad for Rhode Island, he's been clear that that's his position.
Okay, listen, you go after Allan Fung, you go after Trump. How do you square, though, that Johnston, Rhode Island, North Providence, Rhode Island, some politicians, Democrat politicians, they went for Trump. How do you go after Trump without alienating people you need?
What people in
Cranston,
Rhode Island
too,
want,
had a significant people going.
What people in Rhode Island want is they want leaders in Washington who are fighting for them, right? As I spend time around Rhode Island, particularly in senior centers, what I hear is a lot of frustration. People love our state, they love our country, but they're frustrated. They're frustrated because the cost of living is going up. Gas, heating oil, food. They're frustrated because they see an extreme Supreme Court taking away rights that have been on the books for 50 years. And they see a political environment in Washington that's just become toxic. So I'm running for Congress because I want to take on the big oil and gas and drug companies that are price gouging people. I want to fight for fundamental rights, and I want to work across the aisle to get things done.
Let me just go back to this question, though. You had a significant, Donald Trump, as I recall, in 2016, won Johnston, won North Providence, and he won some other towns. And you just gave me a litany of how bad he is and how bad Allan Fung is for not backing away from that. What do you say to those voters who voted for Trump in Democrat land, Johnson and North Providence?
Yeah, listen, I will always work across the aisle with anyone, even people I disagree with. That's what I did as state treasurer. As state treasurer, I passed a historic school construction program that's put 20,000 people to work fixing schools all across the state. We're building a new elementary school in Johnston, new elementary schools in Cranston. That was passed with bipartisan support. Bill after bill at the State House, financial literacy, tax-free savings accounts for kids with disabilities. These are bills that I passed with Republican sponsors. So I'll work across the aisle. That being said, do I think that Donald Trump was good for this country? No, I don't. And I don't want to see him come back. And in particular, I don't want Congress to be controlled by people who voted to overturn the election. You know, in a democracy, you have to accept the results, even if they're the results that you weren't hoping for. And we are in a dangerous time because there were over 100 Republican members of Congress who voted not to certify the election. Those people who voted to overturn the will of the people should not be in charge of Congress heading into the next presidential election cycle. In the last two debates that I had with Allan Fung, my opponent, I asked him both times, would you please pledge not to vote for someone to be Speaker of the House who also voted to overturn the 2020 election? He wouldn't take that pledge. And there were 60 Republicans in the House who did the right thing and voted to certify the election. He could choose one of them to support for Speaker, but of course, he's already allied himself with Kevin McCarthy and the extreme wing of the Republican Party in Washington. That's not what people in Rhode Island want.
All right, well, he'll have a chance to defend himself when you attend a debate right here on Channel 10 coming up in a couple of weeks. Seth Magaziner, Democrat running for Congress, continues with us. You'll be with us on November 3rd in debate. So, we're getting close to debate time. So and I've gone over all the issues with you. You believe, Allan Fung told me he's pro-choice with exceptions. And he told me he believes that you're pro-choice with no exceptions. Do you agree with that assessment?
I don't agree with either one of those statements. So my record is clear. I believe that women should have the ability to decide when to have children and how to have children. I don't think that decision should be made by politicians or by judges. What I support and what I would do in Congress is bring back Roe versus Wade. For 49 years in this country, women were protected under the Roe versus Wade framework before the extreme judges on the Supreme Court overturned it. What I would do is pass a federal law restoring the Roe versus Wade framework. Under Roe v. Wade, generally speaking, the decision to terminate a pregnancy was the woman's choice, but states were allowed to put some guardrails and some exceptions on that, particularly in later stages. We did the same thing in Rhode Island 3 years ago. In Rhode Island, we passed a law called the Reproductive Privacy Act to protect the right to choose in Rhode Island. I was for that. I testified for it. I rallied for it. Allan Fung was against it. And so for Allan to now, in the late stages of a congressional race, say, oh, but now I'm pro-choice, well, his record doesn't match up with that. And I think what a lot of people in Rhode Island, particularly women, are looking at is saying, Well, if we couldn't trust him to do the right thing 3 years ago in Rhode Island, how can we trust him to do the right thing in Washington, D.C.? You can't.
Yeah.
But you know where I stand. And where I stand is on the side of Rhode Island women.
All right, well, let me just narrow this down, because he's going to come after you next week and say you're pro-choice with no exceptions. If someone wants to go there on the last day and abort the baby who might be perfectly healthy, would you be okay with that? Look, that's a tough question, but why don't you, let's be accurate.
So under Roe versus Wade, which we had for 49 years in this country, states had the ability to put limitations on late-term abortion. In the law that we passed 3 years ago that I supported, that Allan opposed, it specifically said that late-term abortions were not covered. So I support the Roe versus Wade framework, where states have the ability to put those kinds of limitations on.
Okay.
That's what we did in Rhode Island 3 years ago. I was for it. He was against it.
You want a federal Roe v. Wade return, but you will allow states to make rules at the end with regard to certain things. Is that clear?
That's right, and that's the way it was for 49 years in this country. That's what we should go back to.
Okay. You also say he'll go down there and cut Medicaid because McCarthy will cut Medicaid, and he's going to go along with him. And he says, absolutely not. My mother's, you saw him at the last debate, my mother's is on the Social Security, Social Security.
Yeah. Well, listen, Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader who Allan Fung has said he will support for Speaker, has said that cutting Social Security and Medicare is one of his top priorities in Congress. The top Republican on the Budget Committee said that he's even willing to shut down the government as leverage in order to cut Social Security and Medicare. Seniors are struggling with these rising costs. Seniors are struggling with the cost of food, with the cost of health care. The last thing that we should be doing is putting people in place who want to cut Social Security and Medicare. So
he says he's not.
Yeah,
you guys can mix this up on the debate. We'll have plenty of time.
No, this is important for a lot of people, right? For him to say, I don't support cutting Social Security. I just want to put the people in charge of Congress who have said it's one of their top priorities to do it. It's beyond disingenuous. And again, for a Rhode Islander watching at home, for all the mothers and grandparents watching at home who are worried about their Social Security and Medicare, they're not going to want to support somebody who says that they're going to put the people in charge of Congress, the Republican leadership, who want to cut Social Security and Medicare. One other point on this. Last month, Democrats in Congress passed a bill for the first time to let Medicare negotiate with the drug companies to lower the cost of prescription drugs. Every single Republican in Congress voted against that bill. Allan Fung said he would have voted against it too. Why? It's because the prescription drug companies are funding their campaigns. So there's a clear track record here of being on the side of the drug companies, the oil companies, not on the side of working Rhode Islanders with Fung and the Republicans. I will always fight for Rhode Island workers. I don't want their money. I'm not taking it. I'm going to fight to protect Social Security and Medicare, and I am not going to be like Allan and vote for a leadership team that says that cutting it is one of their top priorities.
In your commercials, when he goes down there, the first vote he will take is Kevin McCarthy. Does that assume the Republicans are taking control of Congress? Are you assuming that?
Well, we're doing everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Because again,
well, here in Rhode Island you are, but the polls would be against you. It would appear nationwide. Now I want to talk about the latest polls too.
Yeah, well, look, in Rhode Island we have to do our part to make sure that we have a Congress that reflects Rhode Island values. The Republican leadership, Kevin McCarthy, Steve Scalise, who was here fundraising for Allan Fung yesterday, Jim Jordan, they have said that their top priorities are cutting Social Security and Medicare, which Rhode Islanders do not want, trying to pass a national abortion ban, which Rhode Islanders, I'm sure, do not want, and paving the path for a return of Donald Trump, which most Rhode Islanders do not want. And so, yes, the most important vote that the next member of Congress from Rhode Island takes is that first vote of who is going to be in charge of Congress.
If we assume there's a red wave rolling in and the Republicans are taking control, wouldn't it be good for us to at least have one person on a delegation who has the ear of Kevin McCarthy?
No, for two reasons. All right, so first, again, Rhode Island, we have to do our part to make sure that Congress is not taken over by the extreme Republicans who want to cut health care, cut Social Security and abortion rights.
You're not giving in to that. They're taking over. Okay.
Yeah, no. It's, I mean, the election hasn't come yet. The people still have a chance to speak. Second, though, we have a congressional delegation in Rhode Island that's very strong. Jack Reed, Sheldon Whitehouse, Jim Langevin, David Cicilline. They have been able to deliver resources for Rhode Island when Democrats have been in charge and when Republicans have been in charge. And I look forward to working with them to do that. Regardless of which party controls Congress, I'm going to fight to bring resources back to URI, to Galilee, to Quonset, to RIC and CCRI, to fix our roads, fix our bridges. Our congressional delegation has shown that it's possible to do that, regardless of which party's in charge.
All right, we're getting tight on time here. Just a couple of things. Inflation, broken borders. a broken economy. They're laying that at President Biden's doorstep. I looked at the polls today. They're not good for him. He's underwater again. Do you have faith in President Biden?
I do. You know,
how do you, given the numbers going that way?
So first of all, inflation is a global phenomenon, right? There's inflation in Europe, there's inflation in Asia, across the world. But here's the difference. What I see is Democrats trying to do something about it. Passed a bill last month to cap the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. Every Republican voted against it. Passed a bill last month to expand domestic energy production. Huge investments, not just in clean energy, but conventional energy also. Every Republican voted against it. I'm going to Congress with an agenda to suspend the federal gas tax, to bring more manufacturing jobs back to Rhode Island so that we don't have supply chains all around the world. What I see on the Democratic side is a recognition that people are hurting, but that we need leaders who are going to do something about it, who are going to act. And on the Republican side, I just see a lot of rhetoric, not a lot of solutions.
All right. You have to get there, and you're spending a lot of money. And so is the other side. You guys are both spending millions. Your strategy was to go after him hard on abortion, and yet abortion shows up. It doesn't show up as a top 3 issue in the polls I've seen. You put out a poll not that long ago saying you're within striking distance, margin of error. Democrats just put out a poll that says 48-48. The other polls have him taking you by 5 to 7%, depending on which one you look at, maybe a little higher in certain ones. This is going to be close. Everybody on both sides say there could be 5,000 votes between the two of you. Do you agree with that? And what's your new strategy? I'm hearing Seth Magaziner is changing up his commercials, changing up his strategy.
So what we're seeing as we get into the final weeks, as more people are tuning in and paying attention and deciding who they're going to vote for, we feel the momentum on our side. And we feel the momentum on our side because there's a real contrast in this race. I'm talking about taking on the oil companies that are making billions of dollars of profits overcharging Rhode Islanders at the gas pump. I'm talking about taking on the prescription drug companies, which are making billions of dollars overcharging seniors for their medication. On the other hand, Allan's not talking about taking on the oil companies or the drug companies because he's getting millions of dollars of campaign cash from them. Those negative ads that the Republicans are running against me, they're all paid for by the oil companies, by the drug companies, because they know that Allan's going to be in their pocket and that if I get to Congress, I'm going to be tough with them. So I think as more people tune in and they see this contrast, the momentum is going to continue to be in our favor. We're going to win this race, and we're going to bring Rhode Island values to Washington.
Just about a minute left. Are you shifting strategy? Are you going with a different bent, talking more about you than him at this point? Again, just about a minute left.
Well, no. I mean, the things that I've been talking about, we've been talking about from the beginning. So from the very time that we launched this campaign, I spent a lot of time in senior centers across the district, talking with workers across the district, and talking about how we have to crack down on price gouging by the oil companies, crack down on prescription drug costs, and yes, protect fundamental rights like the right to choose that are being stripped away by these extreme right-wing judges. And I think what's happening now in the final weeks is more people are paying attention, tuning in, seeing what we're all about, that we're fighting for working people, and seeing that my opponent is in the pocket of those same industries that's price gouging Rhode Islanders.
Let's hold it there. You will meet and debate right here on NBC 10, November 3rd, and you guys can go back and forth. You can fight for the job that you both want. Seth Magaziner, the treasurer, running for Congress. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.